You're tuning in to the Black Hollywood Live Network, featuring news, interviews, and commentary on all things Black Hollywood. Hollywood redefined. From Los Angeles, California, presented by Maria Menounos and streaming live thanks to Akamai Technologies. This is Black Hollywood Live. Justice is served. Featuring the week's roundup and commentary on legal news. Black Hollywood Live. Hollywood redefined.
You're listening to Black Hollywood Live.
And now, the host for Black Hollywood Live, Justice is Served.
Today on Justice is Served, black men, white cops, a deadly combination in America. Then the latest on the Cosby sex scandal, new allegations accusing America's favorite dad of being the ultimate creep. Plus, pardon me, Hollywood superstar Mark Wahlberg is asking the governor of Massachusetts to clear his name. And revenge porn. Sorry, but you can't post naked photos of your ex on the internet. Welcome to Justice is Served. I'm Sara Azari, your host. I'm a criminal defense attorney and legal analyst. And with me today is my co-host Chelsea Galicia, also an attorney. And we have a very, very special guest with us, Dan Stormer. Dan is a leading civil rights attorney in the country and also a very renowned international human rights lawyer. He has obtained multi-million-dollar verdicts in civil rights cases against police departments and various governmental agencies across the nation. So welcome, Dan, to the show.
Good to be here.
Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
And I can't think of a more perfect person to be here and talk to us about our case of the week today. The issue of African American men across the country being shot and killed by white police officers. This is happening not just in rural Ferguson, Missouri, and not just in metropolitan New York City. It's happening all over the place, I think in Cleveland, Ohio, in Phoenix, in North Carolina. And the question is, and I'm curious to see what your thoughts are, Dan, is this racist law enforcement? Is this white policemen targeting African American men?
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt. Of course it is. There's a long history in our society of racism among law enforcement officers, and that racism, while in some ways has lessened with more open hiring policies and policies that require more people of color to be participants in the employment process, it still exists to a tremendous extent. And you see it play out all over the country all of the time. I would make one slight amendment. It is primarily white men against black men, white police officers against black victims of their brutality. But there is a sort of an overarching issue that comes into play here, and is that police departments are by nature bastions of prejudice. I have had cases where my clients who were Latino were shot and killed by Latino police officers, because what is taught in the police academy and in police departments is essentially racism, is that you get to stereotype, you get to profile, you get to treat people as objects and as stereotypes. So it extends beyond white on black. It extends to people of color upon people of color because of the nature of police departments.
And I think Attorney General Eric Holder made a statement in response to what happened with Eric Garner in New York, that police officers are racist. I think that's what he was talking about, that they're all racist, and that the feds now are getting involved in response to this and doing a de-bias training which is what they've done in Seattle and some other cities. For me, it was interesting because it's almost like taking the cops carte blanche away. He now has to stop and think about what he's going to do and what color skin the assailant has and whether it's okay to do it or not. And a lot of police officers, I think, have sued the federal government and Eric Holder because they feel like their lives are at risk because of this depolicing, essentially. But
if your life is at risk because you're no longer allowed to be racist, sorry.
On that note, I also, last week when the news broke out about Garner, the nation was still in outrage over what happened in Ferguson with the shooting death of Michael Brown. And people were protesting all over the nation. There was this we were all trying to process what happened with the grand jury in Michael Brown and the fact that they didn't indict Officer Wilson. And bam, the news broke out that the grand jury in New York City came back no bill and failed to indict Officer Pantaleo of the New York Police Department for the choking death of Eric Garner. Unlike Ferguson, where we had to rely on testimony as to why Officer Wilson shot and killed Michael Brown, in the Eric Garner scenario, we actually have a video, and I think it's important for the viewers to watch this. I'm sure a lot of us have seen it. It's rather disturbing, but I think before we go further, we should see what happened in New York City and Staten Island.
Look. You play your hard way for what? Every time you see me, you want to mess with me. I'm tired of it. It stops today.
This guy right here is forcibly trying to lock somebody up for breaking up a fight.
Everybody standing here, they told you I didn't do nothing. I did not sell nothing. Because every time you see me, you want to harass me, you want to stop me, try to sell cigarettes. I'm minding my business, officer. I'm minding my business. Please just leave me alone. I told you the last time, please just leave me alone. Please, don't touch me. Don't touch me, please.
Hold on.
Listen, don't touch me, please. Do not touch me. Damn, man.
All right, stop. Give us your hands, buddy.
Where your hand, buddy? I can't breathe.
Very disturbing. I can't, 9 weeks of deliberation, I think 50 witnesses and 60 exhibits, including this video. I think this video alone should have returned an indictment against Officer Pantaleo. But what do you think, Dan and Chelsea, what do you think is the impact of the fact that there was no indictment on a civil suit against the New York Police Department?
Well, first, I just want to back up a little bit and try and understand, if it's possible to understand, why there was no indictment. Because to most of us it seems outrageous, and I don't know if it justifies it, but the only thing that I could figure out was that Officer Pantaleo, in his hours of testimony before the grand jury, successfully convinced these 23 members, half of who were white, a quarter were said to be black, and a quarter Hispanic, that he didn't intend to kill him, and that he didn't know that maneuver, which was just a takedown maneuver that he learned at the academy, and not a chokehold. His words, not mine.
Right, but chokeholds are against the policy in the New York Police Department.
So that
but this is not defined in their policies as a chokehold.
It is not.
It is not. I'm sorry.
This is what, a caress?
Yes. Yeah, this is a caress. This is a carotid hold, which is intended supposedly to cut off blood flow to the brain, therefore causing you to pass out, as opposed to a chokehold, which is essentially a cutting off your ability to breathe.
But didn't the coroner determine that the cause of death was him being choked?
Oh,
Yes.
Absolutely. I'm just saying that their position on this,
That
the
it's not a
position that was put forth,
I
was
see.
it wasn't really a chokehold. I mean, he was just overweight, and so he deserved to die.
God, I got so much to say about that. But just that apparently the only way that we got this no indictment was that Pantaleo successfully convinced these people that he didn't mean to kill him, that he didn't know that what he was doing was a substantial risk to this man's life.
Because of his size and his illness, and he was
at the
asthmatic, wasn't
time,
he?
they didn't know about the risk. They didn't know his health background. Obviously, you could see that he's overweight, but we all know that that's not grounds to essentially kill someone
For selling loose cigarettes. It's not the crime of the century,
right?
essentially.
So people who are blaming his health, diabetes and hypertension, those were contributory, but that is not the cause. And I think that people are not really clear on the difference. The medical examiner said that what caused the death was the choke and the officer's compression on his chest, not the high blood pressure, not his diabetes, probably had high cholesterol, not his own weight, none of that. So I just wanted to backtrack on that and talk about that's the only plausible reason that I could see how this grand jury came back with their decision.
Actually,
Do you?
The answer is actually, in my opinion, very easy. Is the prosecutor didn't want one. I mean, there's a famous federal judge, Saul Wachtel, who said that a good prosecutor could indict a ham sandwich if he wanted to. And it's same in Ferguson and in New York, is that they gave the police officers the opportunity to tell a one-sided, uncross-examined tale, just a narrative, to the grand jury, and they were probably reasonably appealing guys who have families, and I'm sure there were a whole bunch of things that were worked into the process about how badly they felt. And they were allowed essentially to talk their way out of it. A typical grand jury would have shown that video, would have looked at the circumstances surrounding it, and would have indicted in a second. That's point one. Point two is they did not go for reckless endangerment. They didn't offer up the possibility to the grand jury of reckless endangerment.
What does that mean? Can you explain
it is
what that
a
means?
lower level, if you want to explain.
No, you can go ahead.
It is a lower level than a murder one or involuntary manslaughter. It is where you place someone else's well-being in jeopardy as a result of either reckless or intentional behavior.
So then they would have been on the hook for leaving him there on the ground when he is struggling and not getting him medical attention.
Actually, no, even before then, they would have been on the hook for their behavior in taking him down and applying the hold. And this would be a classic reckless endangerment, but the prosecutor chose not to present
Instruct,
that.
correct, yeah. And what do you, Dan?
Actually,
what do you
to take a step back to answer your question?
Yes.
It has no impact on the civil case.
So would it have helped the civil case if he was indicted? If he was indicted and tried and then found guilty?
Yes, it would have been
helped.
A determination, because it's a higher standard of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It would have been a determination essentially of liability, and thereafter it would have been a question of damages.
I see. Okay. But his family, I think his family has sued the New York Police Department and the city of New York for $75 million, which, we can all claim whatever we want in a complaint. Doesn't mean necessarily that we'll get that. But so they can still proceed with a civil case despite this no bill by the grand jury.
Absolutely.
And what specifically is the civil claim going to be for, and how are they going to win?
Well, it'll be several things. One is it'll be what's called a 42 U.S.C. 1983 claim, which is a civil rights claim in federal court. It will also be claims for assault, battery, some civil version of reckless endangerment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, a whole series of claims.
And basically the 1983 section is about the excessive force and also the witnessing officer's failure to intervene. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
And what are your thoughts about the federal government's response and this debiasing of police officers, essentially taking away their power to make arrests as they see fit if the person is of color?
Well, I don't know if they're taking away the police officer's ability to arrest them if they see fit, but obviously there is something wrong system-wide, and it's about time that we have leaders acknowledging that. And the debias, I don't know exactly how it will work. There's probably going to be attempts that won't work, and I hope that doesn't dissuade people from supporting it. Not everything we try is going to work the first time. Maybe we're going to find different methods to do it, but it's about time, and we've got to take it seriously.
And there's also a response about, President Obama is planning on spending, I think, another $75 million on equipping police officers with camera-ready uniforms.
Well, we saw that that's not exactly helpful because in this case, we had a video. But the problem with video is that the person in the video can talk their way out of intent. And so I don't really know how helpful they'll be. I was much more supportive of it before the Eric Garner non-indictment decision came down. What do you think?
I think that those cameras are incredibly helpful. In this case, the city will be held civilly liable, and it will pay millions of dollars in damages to the family. And cities, like corporations, other entities, respond to their wallets, and if they get hit with a few more of those, then it'll make a big difference. So I'm a very big fan of the videos.
Well, and also, but you know, as a defense attorney, I also think about the police officer who's going to say, "Oh, the battery died, that's why it was off." I mean, you know, there's also the technical issues that camera's going to have a certain vantage point, and it's going to cut off. You know. Perhaps it'll only capture a certain distance away from the police officer. And then, you know, it has to be on, right? It has to be on, it has to be functioning. And I can just see police officers talking their way out of why theirs were not working
this
on that day.
A good reason why we all have cell phones is so that as citizens, we can still be vigilant witnesses.
Like the bystander in Garner.
Yes.
Well, you may remember that for several years, when cell phones first came out with video capacity, a number of entities passed laws saying that witnesses, bystanders, could not, in fact, take videos of police officers in the performance of their duties because it supposedly endangered police officers. Those were all thrown out. Just a quick point on what you talked about, the miraculous failures that take place with those. Here in Los Angeles, I think there were 200 cars that were supposedly outfitted with video capacity, and none of them were working. And Beck, the chief of police, let that continue.
Yeah, and yet he's supposedly supportive of this. But I know from the Santa Monica Police Department, some of my cases are against the police department in Santa Monica, and they I think most, if not all, their cars are equipped with cameras, but half the time I can't get a video out of them because it wasn't on or it wasn't working. So I'm not sure how effective, you know, spending all this money on something like this is going to be in terms of a response to this issue.
Well, even if it dissuades some officers from using excessive force because they think, I don't know if my camera's working or not, but it might be, and they have to think twice, a deterrent is not a bad thing, even if it doesn't actually work all the time.
No, I agree. And Dan, have you had a case that is, I doubt there's a case out there that's so close to Garner, but have you had a case where you've represented an African American or someone of color in a situation where they've been shot to death or other's killed by police officers?
Oh, absolutely. And it is, I mean, I had a case very recently, just within the past couple months, where an African-American youth, 22-year-old kid, recent graduate of Berkeley, his father was essentially being harassed by the police department. And this didn't end up in his death, luckily, but he ended up, there was a videotape which really helped him tremendously. He ended up being tased in the groin 4 times because he came out and he said, "Is there any, can you not arrest my dad?" I mean, that was what he said, and every one of the bystanders went along with it, and then they just took him down and stood
ethnicity?
over him.
I'm sorry?
He was African American.
Okay.
The officers were primarily Latino. And that's one of the issues is the profiling that is allowed by police departments.
And
I've had, as I said earlier, clients who've been shot while standing there with their hands up.
What agency was this, if you are allowed to say?
Well, it's uniform. I mean, it's the LAPD, it's the sheriff's departments, it's the Colton Police Department, it's the Maywood Police Department, which got disbanded. I mean, it is a function of
the system.
Of the system.
And how is there any way for citizens to keep the pressure on?
Well, one of the two of you may not remember a person by the name of Michael Zinzin. Michael was an incredible advocate of citizen review boards. And one of the best things is what has taken place recently, which is just today, in fact, or it was voted on yesterday, was the creation of a citizen review board for the sheriff's department. There is one for the police department, which has been essentially useless for years and years, but has recently started feeling its oats. Police review boards are wonderful things. What can individuals do? They can videotape. They cannot accept the idea that when the police say, well, he reached for his waistband. I mean, every case you have, he reached for his waistband. And when they do the search, there's no gun, there's no knife, there's no nothing. So why would he be reaching for his waistband? Does he want to scratch his belly? And then they shoot him.
Do you think that there will be real change, or will this be like Rodney King and Reginald Denny, where we had people up in arms for a short period of time, and then I don't know if I saw much difference.
Well, you did see a difference. I mean, I'm a glass half full kind of guy. You did see a difference, and you've seen a tremendous difference in police departments over the years. It moves at a snail's pace, and it moves very slowly. But when you get to the Cosby section of this segment, it's similar to that. There is tremendous improvement. There were not the protests like this. I mean, it was accepted for years and years. When Rodney King got beat up by the police, that was accepted practice for years and years. If you ran, you got the crap kicked out of you when you got caught. Everybody was allowed to do that. So a lot of that has changed. So I'm actually optimistic. I think these tragic deaths cause an examination. The poor kid, the 12-year-old who was shot with a pellet gun by the police officer, African-American kid in the projects playing with a pellet gun. Cop pulls up, less than 2 seconds, the cop shoots him. Less than 2 seconds, cop gets out of his car and shoots him. Training, bias training, all of those things are having an incremental effect. And people are speaking out more so than ever. Sorry for rambling on.
No, it's really important information for us and our viewers. Okay, so moving on to On the Docket, our first case that we're going to discuss is, of course, the Cosby sex scandal, which continues. We talked a little bit about it last week, but since then, there have been 3 former Playboy bunnies who have come forward and accused Bill Cosby of drugging and raping them and sexually assaulting them. And there's also been 1 lawsuit filed amongst all these accusers. So with respect to the former Playboy bunnies, and no offense to former Playboy bunnies, but, you know, there's that question that's often asked, can prostitutes be raped, right? And yes, they can. But it's a similar question in this situation, is that is the former Playboy bunnies, is their credibility the same as these other accusers? Because these are women in their twilight years. They're, you know, regular women. Some of them were secretaries in the entertainment business. Some of them were managers. You know, now we're sexing it up. We're sexing this group up with former Playboy bunnies. And the question is, do they have less credibility? And if they do, is that going to impact the credibility of the remaining accusers?
I don't think anymore that we stigmatize as much Playboy bunnies. Probably in part because of the reality show that they did. It humanized them. We saw them as women, some of whom were intelligent and ambitious and relatable. And so once we relate to those women, we stigmatize them less. And I think that they can be credible, especially in numbers. I think that helps that.
Right, because I think the issue here is, you know, normally in a case like this, you have he said, she said, and here you have he said, she said, she said, she said, she said, and it's just never ending. But there's also, I don't know, I just think, as you know, Marty Singer, Cosby's attorney, is going to go to town now with, you know, before he just had Janice Dickinson, who lacked a lot of credibility. Now he has the 3 women as well.
And 20 women.
And one of them,
20 women, correct.
One of the former Playboy Bunny said that she knows personally of up to 12 that had this experience.
But won't come forward.
Yes, so perhaps in time they will.
And one of the things I would point out is, as a criminal defense attorney, you know, the jury believes the person that's in front of them. They don't believe the person that was the person 10 years ago. And these women will present a particularly credible presentation if it ever comes to that sort of hearing. The other thing
because
is,
they won't look like Playboy bunnies anymore.
They won't look like, but you also have to remember what a Playboy, compare Beyonce and her recent performances to what a Playboy bunny looked like, and it's not even in the same
Right, it's not
universe.
controversial anymore.
Yeah, it's
the
not.
outfits and no.
Right. Meaning Playboy bunnies are way more tame than
Yes.
some of the
Yes.
rock stars that we see today. Okay,
And the Victoria's Secret models that we watched
last night, exactly. So Gloria Allred, we briefly touched upon this last week because as we were taping the show, there was a press conference with Gloria Allred and these three women coming forward. So Gloria Allred is now taking center stage, and she's always involved in the most sensational cases. This one brings to mind the Tiger Woods sex scandal. And so she's here and she's telling Cosby, hey, set aside $100 million, waive the statute of limitations, let's just go to court and let's be done with this and let the judge figure out the truth. As preposterous as that sounds, my question is she taking center stage for self-promotion because there's that, about her, or is she really out for the cause?
I'm not sure those are mutually exclusive. Could be that both are true. And I think some people seek her out because they know that she has the ability to get attention. And so there might be some women who they know what they're signing up for when they go seek out Gloria Allred. This is her thing. And it promotes herself and it highlights what's going on in these cases. So
because she is the person we expect to see when something like this comes up.
I won't speak badly of her.
I know Gloria, and I consider her a friend. Gloria was around doing this same type of behavior 35 years ago, 2015. She has been a voice on behalf of women for, she probably resents this, decades. But
hopefully she's not tuning in.
She is who she is. This is what she does.
Yes.
And there is no one more committed to those issues than Gloria. How she delivers them sometimes is controversial, but her commitment to issues of feminism cannot be challenged in any fashion, in my opinion.
Well, and the LAPD, Chief Beck has responded that the LAPD is taking these allegations very, very seriously. They're going to investigate each and every one of them, irrespective of how old the allegations or the claims are.
I'm glad that they're taking it seriously, but how seriously can you conduct an investigation for something that's 30 years old? I mean, they went to talk to Hugh Hefner. That's great, but I'm not sure what they can really find at this point.
True. But at least it has the appearance like they're not being dismissive about these women's claims. And there's one lawsuit filed by a Riverside woman named Judy, I think Huth is how you pronounce her name, and she's claiming that Cosby met her when she was 15, that he forced her to masturbate him at the Playboy Mansion, and that this has caused severe emotional distress in her, but that she didn't connect her distress to these incidents until just recently in the past 3 years. So this woman, in Cosby's response by his lawyer that was filed to the complaint, Cosby says she has asked first for $100,000 from me, then $250,000. Both have been rejected for her to stay quiet. And she had tried to go to a tabloid and it failed. They didn't buy her story. So is this starting to look more like a shakedown?
I don't think that by itself is showing that this is a shakedown, because when she sought that money, $100,000, later $250,000, that may not have said, give me this money or I'll talk. That was, I've experienced this injury, this distress. I feel like $100,000 is fair damages. If you would like to do this outside of court, we can handle this ourselves.
Like a settlement offer.
Yeah, this is what I'm asking. But
what about the tabloid pitch?
Do we know that that's true?
Well, it's Well, we don't
Marty
know.
Singer said it, so
Yeah, I'm suspect of some things that attorneys say when they're advocating for their clients.
And in this case, it is a settlement offer. It is nothing more than litigation, civil litigation on issues of sexual harassment and sexual assault is a blood sport. It is not something anyone should engage in. And I tell my clients in these types of cases that you do not want to be part of that process. So if there is a way of resolving it short of litigation, you should resolve it short of litigation, because the process does damage to you. So I think,
and it's costly.
And it's costly,
right.
and it's harmful. So if she was trying to resolve it prior to litigation, she was doing what exactly a person involved in the process who does not want to engage in a blood sport should do.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of Cosby's response, aside from the pleading that's filed in response to Judy Huth's complaint, his response has been pretty much silent. So, through his lawyer, he's had this very offensive stance, like, how dare you, I'm Dr. Huxtable, how dare you tarnish my reputation, kind of thing. And he's also tweeted Whoopi Goldberg and Jill Scott, who had supported him on Twitter. But other than that, he's silent. So what can we make of his silence, Dan? What do you think?
I don't think you can make anything of it. If I had a client, whether innocent or guilty, I would probably tell him, unless he wants to have a full-scale national offensive, I would tell him or her, depending on the situation, to let it blow over and then come out afterwards. And because the media has a short attention span, let it sort of wend its way through the process and then come out and present your side of it.
Although in this case, I don't think he ever will, because these charges, or allegations, I shouldn't say charges, these allegations go back years and years and years. They've come and gone through time, and he's always just stayed quiet. So I don't see that he's going to...
But swapped stories with the National Enquirer and kind of kept it quiet.
Yeah, so this is his MO. He's not going to say anything now. He's not going to say anything later.
Right, I agree. All right, so we all know Mark Wahlberg, actor, executive producer of Entourage, the old Calvin Klein underwear model who was grabbing his crotch, Marky Mark the rapper, but I think what a lot of us don't know about Mark Wahlberg that he used to be a thug on the streets of Dorchester, Massachusetts. So back in April of 1988, Mark Wahlberg was under the influence of drugs and alcohol, and he goes into a convenience store essentially to rob the guy of some booze. And the man that was working at the store was Vietnamese. He hits him with a club and knocks him down unconscious, and in the course of running out of the store, punches another Vietnamese man so hard in the face that the guy goes blind in one eye. And this is Mark Wahlberg. So
I think the point of you saying that he was Vietnamese is because there were also racial epithets that were...
Exactly. So he, quote unquote, said, Vietnamese fucking shit. And while the police were arresting him, he called both of them slant-eyed gooks. Now, he was 16 at the time, but he was tried as an adult, and this was a permanent felony on his record. And now he's asking the governor of Massachusetts for a pardon. A pardon is essentially a Hail Mary pass that is signed off on by the governor of a state, so it's politically issued. However, it's hardly ever issued. It's a very, very rare gift.
Well, before it goes to a governor, it goes to the board. Goes
to an advisory committee, and then it's recommended to the governor. And so I was curious. This prompted me to look at California, and in the consolidated terms of Schwarzenegger, Pete Wilson, and Gray Davis, in 20 years, only 29 of them were signed off on.
Out of how many? Do you remember how many were asked?
I don't know how many were requested, but they're regular people. People want that public recognition of their redemption. So I imagine there's hundreds and hundreds of them, but only 29 were issued in 20 years. In Massachusetts, where Wahlberg is seeking a pardon, the last pardon that was issued was in 2002. So his chances are slim to none, because even when they are issued, they are for drug-related convictions, not for serious assaults that leave a man blind. Now,
or you're the son of like an outgoing governor.
Right.
Or a major contributor.
Then you really have done, that's your certificate of rehabilitation right there. So now he's saying, this is to complete my transition into turning my life around. It's a really great message for at-risk youth to see that they too can turn their lives around and be forgiven formally. But let's not forget also that he is the owner with some of his family members of the restaurant chain Wahlburger. And he has also made a statement that he anticipates when they expand the chain in California and in neighboring states that he might run into some licensing issues because of this felony. So we don't know if this is for his business portfolio or really for, about clearing his name. And does that matter why he's doing this?
I think it matters less why, and more that nobody else really gets to, so I'm not sure he should be able to. Now, if other people do and he does, fine. But I think the appearance of special treatment for a
celebrity hotshot,
right, and part of the criteria for a pardon is that you have shown that you have been a very contributing member of society. And so he can cite all the millions that he's donated to various causes, but other people aren't able to do that. But that doesn't mean that they have turned their lives around any less. So I think they can't.
Well, in Massachusetts right now, there's 3 pardons pending the review by the governor, who's on his way out in January. 2 of them have to do with drug sales, sale of marijuana, sale of crack cocaine. The third one is an assault, so it is a violent crime. But the petitioner is very close with the DA's office there. They're supporting him because he has he's been involved in crime intervention and getting people off the streets and into the Nation of Islam. And so at what point, what is enough rehabilitation? Do you need the backing of the DA's office or some politician, or is it enough to be volunteering and helping kids like Wahlberg has done? He's given a lot to the Boys and Girls Club. He's created a foundation for at-risk kids. He's volunteered for the Good Shepherd homeless shelter. He's donated more than $7 million to various youth causes. But the point is that other people have done what they can, like you said, in rehabilitating themselves, and they've been turned down. So how fair is it to now open the door to a celebrity like Wahlberg?
I think that's judging it from the wrong direction.
Angle.
Because it doesn't matter. It's like when people were talking about when Obama set up his new presidential approach to immigration, and some people were saying, well, that I don't fall within it, so it's not fair that these people should get it if I'm not getting it. Well, I don't think that's the right analysis. I think the right analysis is, has he engaged in behavior that is worthy of rehabilitation? I think that's the only question. And I think he has. I sort of think in some ways it falls in the who cares category for Wahlberg. But the reality is we should have a penal system that has a rehabilitative benefit, so that if you do your time for your crime and then you continue to have a wonderful life, there should be a benefit. And you shouldn't have this something that took place when you're a 16-year-old and slightly nuts
follows you
throughout your life. And so what if he's applying for licenses here? He has done an incredible job of rehabilitating himself, and that should be rewarded. And it should stand out as an example to other people that if they do it, they can get the same result. Now, they're not all Mark Wahlbergs, but we should reward rehabilitation.
No, I
in
agree.
Celebrities and non-celebrities.
Yes.
Everybody,
Yes.
Uniformly. But I have an issue with what he's. I think it's great what he's done, but I can't believe that nobody's actually gone after the victim yet to see what the victim's position is in this, because he's lived a life essentially as a blind man. But my question is if I was Mark Wahlberg and I had all this money and I had these resources to contribute and donate to society, why not also, and knowing that I want to get a pardon, why not also maybe give to the Vietnamese American community, to specifically to youth in that community? And why not, I don't know if there was restitution ordered. I mean, I imagine if the guy went blind, there's some restitution order in place. Where is the talk of he paid full restitution? Or maybe he hasn't. Where is the apology to the victim? Because if I represented him and was filing his petition for a pardon, I would not only just back it up with all this volunteer work, but I would want it to be really geared towards that victim specifically.
Yeah, and I understand he has not apologized to them. So
Right.
I think that would be a big part of it. I mean, to seek somebody out and to face, or however is appropriate for the victim, to acknowledge them, what they've been put through, to get an apology, I think should, whenever it's possible, be required.
And the failure to do that may be grounds for denying the pardon. And that seems to me an appropriate standard to deal with in determining whether
But you've made the victim whole first, right, before you start giving to the community.
But I think that none of this is really going to matter, because even if a board recommends to the governor to pardon somebody, and the governors are going to be very reluctant to do it. Politics is really nasty, and when they're running for re-election or for another office, somebody's going to throw that in their face that this guy let off.
Soft on crime.
Yes.
Right.
And so part of it comes back down to us as citizens, that we demand such a tough stance and no forgiveness and no redemption. Because if we as a society believed in rehabilitation and redemption, then we wouldn't buy into this guy is soft on crime because he pardoned somebody who made a major mistake 30 years ago, but really has turned their life around.
He would have been in good shape if he had committed this crime in California, because now with Jerry Brown has signed off something like 341, don't quote me on the number, but it's up in the 300s since 2011 when he's been in office. So I think we're a better state for pardons at this point than maybe Massachusetts is. But okay, moving on to our last topic of the day, revenge porn, which is also known as involuntary porn. It is part of our penal code. The law was enacted last year in October of 2013, and it prohibits people from posting photographs and videos of private body parts of their exes and people that initially they got these photographs from lawfully, in order to cause severe emotional distress. And in order for a prosecutor to prove his case under the statute, the person has to actually suffer severe emotional distress as well. So when the statute was passed, there was a lot of loopholes, and there still are some issues with it. It doesn't cover, for instance, hackers. So if I go through Dan's phone and I get a bunch of naked pictures of him and then I post it on the internet, I'm not liable under the statute. Sorry, Dan. And also, if I am a redistributor, so these website operators who get these photographs and then milk the victims in order to take the photographs off the web, they're also not liable under this statute. But
they are civilly, because just at the end of September, at least in California, September 30th, the governor signed a civil statute that if you intentionally pass along these photos or even recklessly distribute these photos, you can be held civilly liable, and that costs money. So I think people should and will think twice.
But for criminal liability, you definitely need specific intent to cause severe emotional distress. And when the statute was passed last year, when the law was passed, it also didn't cover selfies. So it mattered who the photographer was of these images and videos. Now selfies are covered. Last week, the Senate passed a bill that Jerry Brown's going to sign, I'm sure, that covers selfies as well. So now it doesn't matter who took the photos. It really what it means, the statute is like, look, if you have an ex, as much as you hate their guts, you can't take their naked photos that were meant for just the two of you.
And the reason that this was in the news now is because California has got their first conviction under this law, where a guy posted his ex-girlfriend's naked pictures on her employer's Facebook page, asking them to fire her.
Right. So his intent's very clear right there. Whereas to prove liability under the statute, I think it's really difficult, and we were all talking about this before getting on the air, to show that a defendant had the intent to cause severe emotional distress. I mean, you almost need the admission of the defendant, but this case is so blatant that the city attorney's office in Los Angeles didn't have a hard time establishing intent. This man got a year in county jail, which is the maximum term for a misdemeanor in California. He'll probably do a couple weeks. He might be out by now. I don't know. But anyway, so this is interesting. And I think the moral of the story is, even if there's a law in place to protect you, next time you have a breakup, grab the phone, grab the computer, take all the selfies out before you kick it out the door.
That's your lesson?
I think so.
My lesson is to keep not sending them.
Well, if people do, I mean, especially younger people, I think it's kind of an immature thing to do, right?
Well, you want to trust somebody,
on.
But soon enough you'll figure out that trust is not best left to everyone. Very few people should have that kind of trust. This law does require, it's very private.
It does require an agreement between the parties that the material be private between them. So it raises the issue of if it was a porn star, I mean, that's the extreme, but if there was someone who maybe made a statement at some point and said, I don't care what you're doing with my photos, I just love taking them, then of course you bring that in as evidence that they couldn't possibly be suffering severe emotional distress because they didn't care. So that brings us to the end of our show today. Thank you, Dan Stormer, so much for joining us here on Justice is Served. Let's keep the dialogue going during the week. Please find us on iTunes and on YouTube and post your comments and your feedback and your questions for us. And of course, click like. And you can also contact us directly with your feedback and your questions. I can be emailed, sarah@azarilaw.com, or tweeted @azarilaw.
Twitter handle @Chelsea Galicia.
HadsellStormer.com.
I'm sorry, what was that?
HadsellStormer, HADSELL, Stormer.com.
Great.
On the web.
So thanks for tuning in. See you next week right here on Justice is Served.
From producers Maria Menounos, Dario Kristen, Tiana Hobson, Kevin Undergaro, and the entire BHL crew, we would like to thank you for supporting Black Hollywood Live, the first online broadcast network dedicated to African American entertainment. For questions and comments, contact us at info@blackhollywoodlive.com. Like us on Facebook, tweet us, or Instagram us at BHL Online. And I'm your BHL announcer, Scipio. Instagram me at Planet Scipio. Thank you for tuning in. The views expressed here are those of the host only and do not necessarily reflect the views of BHL or its owners or principals.